Hello everyone, welcome to our course Semantics reading. My name is Dr. Mehmet Tunas and today's topic is the second part of sentences as arguments. And if you have any question, as I say always, you can reach me through my email. You can see it here. So let's see today's topic together. So today's topic is sentence as argument, the second part, and this presentation is prepared by Fatma, Asiye and Görkem. So let's start today's topic. So today in this presentation we will see the rest of the clauses types that we learned, some of them last week. So we will start with non-factual clauses, and then we will see verbal nouns, and we will see the difference between verbal nouns and gerunds because they might seem similar to you. And then we will compare the types of clauses that we learned last week and this week. And finally we will cover syntactic ambiguity to the end of this presentation. Okay, so let's start with non-factual clauses. So non-factual clauses, as you can understand from its name, verbs like believe, think, say, seem, doubt, assume, assert, guess, suppose, bet and fear, which are not accompanied by a similar presupposition, are called non-factive verbs. So let's see these examples to understand it better. So in sentence A, I remember Joey closed the door. Here in this sentence you can see the remember verb is not 100% sure statement. So remember here is a weak idea, let's say. I remember Joey closed the door. This sentence might presuppose that Joey didn't close the door as well. So we don't know if Joey closed the door or didn't close the door. So here the presupposition of this sentence include both Joey closed the door, might close the door, maybe we don't know, or Joey didn't close the door. So you can see that because of the verb here, this remember verb, we cannot be sure about the effectivity of the clause here. So we call such kind of clauses which we might not be sure about the effectivity, we call them as non-factual clauses. So let's see some more examples about factivity and non-factivity. So in this sentence you can see that there is not a clause here, embedded clause. It is a sentence. So Andrew is sick. So it is implying that Andrew is 100% sick. So it is an example of factivity. So we can also see here is a clause. This Andrew is sick sentence became a clause here, embedded clause in a that clause. It is said that Andrew is sick. So you can see in the main clause that there is also a certainty here. So this is also an example of factivity. So I realize Andrew is sick. Realize, this verb is also including some percentage of let's say reality. So it is also including some percentage of certainty. So it also an example of factivity. So Andrew must be sick. You can also get the impression that must is also strong actually. So it also includes certainty here. So it is an also example of factivity. But now you can see from these last two sentences which are non-factivity examples. So Andrew may be sick. So you see that may modal verb is not a strong modal verb. So this is a non-factivity example. And when we look at the last sentence here, I think Andrew is sick. So this is my idea. So it also, this sentence also presupposes that Andrew might not be sick as well. So if the verb here, if the verb of the main clause is a weak verb like think, believe, perceive like this. So this is Andrew is sick sentence turns into a non-factivity example then. So in the verbal clause, this is another example. So a noun that is derived from a verb, usually by adding the suffix ing, and that exhibits the ordinary properties of a noun. So verbal nouns are the form of nouns which are created by adding ing to a normal verb. In a very simple sentence, we might say, like, swimming is good for your health. So here, swimming is normally a verb, but we made it a noun by adding ing, and we used it as a noun, as a subject of a sentence. Swimming in the pool is good. As you can see in this example also, his firing of William was a mistake. Onun William'ı vurması. So his firing of William was a mistake. The word firing here functions as a verbal noun. So normally we know that its original form is a verb, but we used it in the function of a noun by adding ing. So these kinds of nouns are called verbal nouns. So verbal nouns can be preceded by the definite article, by adjectives, and by possessives. So let's see the examples here. Her marvelous singing won Helen the scholarship. So you can see that here is a possessive adjective. Her marvelous singing, onun harika şarkı söylemesi kazandırdı. So you can see here that the verb sing is used as a noun here, and it is in the form of the subject of the sentence, and it also got a possessive like any other noun. Like instead of saying her car, her house, her father, her mother, we said her singing. So you can also make many different examples by using also possessive with a verb with ing, like his coming early made me happy. His coming early made me happy. Onun erken gelmesi beni mutlu etti gibi. So just like any noun, the verbal noun can function as a subject. So it can be a subject of a sentence, like driving was impossible, like swimming is good. It is like my example. So as the complement of the verb be, so seeing is believing. Here the complement is believing actually. So seeing is the example of the subject form, the first item. But here you can see the complement believing, görmek, inanmaktır. So here the believe is also a noun, but it is a verbal noun. So as an object after certain verbs, here you can see Lucia likes swimming. Here it is the object. Instead of saying Lucy likes hamburger, we said Lucy likes swimming. You can see the swimming became here the verbal noun, like an object of the like verb. And here you can see another example of the same topic. Helen prefers diving. So you can see the diving example, and he is the object of the, it is the object of the verb prefer. So the verbal nouns might be also used after prepositions to make a prepositional phrase. Let's look at it. Can you watch them without laughing? Here you can see that after a preposition, if we use a verb, we have to add an ing here. So this is also an example of verbal noun. Using verb with ing after a preposition is also an example of verbal noun. So we might be thinking about verbal noun and gerunds. So what is the difference between verbal nouns and gerunds? So you have to be very careful in order not to mix them, misuse them. So let's see their difference on these two tables. So verbal nouns, you can see the sentence example. A brilliant reading of the poem won the competition. A determiner, adjective, a verbal noun is reading, and prepositional phrase, you can see that the reading verbal noun got or is followed with a prepositional phrase like any other noun actually. So let's look at the gerund. Brilliantly reading. So you can see that here is an adverb. So adverbs modifies verbs or other adverbs. So we can understand here that here the reading is actually still in the form of a verb, but the using this with brilliantly, I mean with a preposition, with an adverb makes reading here is an example of a gerund. I hope you understood the difference. They are very similar, but by looking at their usage, we can understand which one is still in the origin of a verb, you can see here, and which was in the form of a noun. So none of the verbs, for example, is followed with a prepositional phrase. This is the property of a noun. So we can understand that here reading is a noun, is used as a noun, but getting an adverb before a word is the function, is the property of a verb. So we can understand here that here the reading is an example of gerund. It is not a verbal noun. Please be careful. So after finishing verbal nouns, let's revise what we have learned from last week's presentation and this week's presentation in the unit of sentences as arguments. So last week we covered full statement clauses, question clauses, infinitive clauses, and gerund clauses. And this week we studied till now non-factual clauses and verbal nouns. So until now we had 6 different types of embedded sentences, actually clauses types. So we also call these clauses as embedded sentences, as you remember from last week's topic. So let's move on. Okay, now let's look at sentence or clauses types. We will see sentence types. It might be main clause or it might be subordinate clause, I mean embedded sentences. So we will see both of the types from now on. So here we will cover the clauses types in a different perspective. So what is a clause? Let's see the definition of the clause first. The smallest grammatical unit that can express a complete proposition. It contains a subject and a verb. There are 2 kinds of clauses, independent and dependent clauses. They might be used together, but independent sentences might be used as a simple sentence alone. So let's see what I mean. So types of clauses are divided into 2 categories. Main or independent clause. It might be called main clause or independent clause. Both of them are same. And another type is subordinate or dependent clause. So subordinate and dependent clause means the same thing actually. So they are same. So these subordinate or dependent clause are actually the embedded sentence types. So let's see what are they. They might be a noun clause, they might be an adjective clause, or they might be an adverb clause, adverbial clause or. So let's see what they are. So independent clauses, I mean main clauses or main sentences you can say, is a group of words that can stand on its own as a sentence. It has a subject, a verb, and it's a complete thought. So independent clause doesn't need any other embedded sentence as a complement. So even if they are only a simple sentence, they are independent clauses. So they are not dependent on a complement. So let's see the example. Even he ran. You can see that it is a very simple sentence. So even this is an independent clause. He ran. So notice that while this sentence only contains 2 words, it is still a complete sentence because it contains a one-word subject and a one-word predicate that is also a complete thought. So they dance under the rain, also an independent clause. Where is your sister is also an independent clause, although it is a question. So let's see dependent or subordinate clause. Actually, this is more like yan cümle or cümlecik. A dependent clause is a group of words that also contains a subject and a verb, but it is not a complete thought. Because it is not a complete thought, a dependent clause cannot stand on its own as a sentence. It is dependent on being attached to an independent clause to form a sentence. So dependent clauses cannot be used on their own without being attached to an independent clause. So let's see the example. Just imagine that someone comes and directly say only this sentence, because I woke up late this morning. So what would be your reaction? So we still don't have the main clause. We still don't have the independent sentence. So only using this dependent clause or subordinate clause with because doesn't convey any messages to the listener. So because I woke up late this morning, so what happened? You would react. So let's look at another subordinate clause. When we arrived in class, so the listener waits for the rest of the sentence, the real message, the main clause. So you can see that dependent clauses or subordinate clauses do not convey the messages on their own without using the independent clause. So let's see the last example. If my neighbor does not pay his rent on time, so what will happen? So you can see that although there is a subject and the auxiliary and a verb, actually although it is a full sentence, since it is a dependent clause, it doesn't convey the message. So that's why we call these kind of sentences as dependent clause or subordinate clauses. So what is a noun clause then? A noun clause is a dependent clause type that acts as a noun. Just imagine a sentence or a clause which functions as a noun in the main sentence. So what I mean you will see. Noun clauses begin with words such as how, that, what, whatever, when, where, like WH question words. Noun clauses can act as subject, direct objects, indirect objects, predicate nominatives, or object of a preposition. So let's see. As a subject, what she wrote is interesting. So you can see here, it is a sentence. She wrote is a sentence, a simple sentence, but since it is a noun clause, it can function as the subject of the main sentence, the whole sentence. What she wrote is interesting. You can see here the noun clause function as the subject. And then after the subject, we can see the auxiliary and the adjective, the normal form of a sentence. So noun clause can also function as an object. For example, I read what she wrote. You can see that the subject of the main clause, the verb, and the object. So you can see the object is a kind of noun clause. So noun clauses begin with question words, as I said. So let's see the simple question and noun clauses, which seems like a question. What do you do in class? Or what we do in class is easy. You can see that here is the subject. What we do in the class is easy. This is the subject. Noun clause as a subject. Where he works is a secret. Onun çalıştığı yer sırdır. You can see that this is again subject. Noun clause as a subject. I don't know what you should do. I don't know what you should do is the object. Noun clause is the object of the main sentence. Mary knows who they are. Mary knows who they are. Again, Mary knows. The noun clause is the object of the main verb. So, if you check if a sentence like this is a noun clause or not, you can change it simply with it pronoun. And if it forms as a grammatically correct sentence, so you can cross that, you can guarantee or you can confirm that it is a noun clause example. For example, what we do in class. So I delete what we do in class and I write it instead of it. It is easy. So you can see that it is grammatically correct. So where he works is a secret. It is a secret. So you can see that again it is grammatically correct. I don't know it. I don't know it. It is grammatically correct. Mary knows it. Again it is grammatically correct. So if you change the noun clause with it, and if it makes a grammatically correct sentence, then it means that you define the noun clause correctly. So this is the confirmation of the noun clause. So noun clauses again begin with, as I said, a WH question. And now we can see noun clauses can also start with whether or if, they are same, or that. We already know them. So you will see. I wonder if the sentence, let's see my explanation first. If the sentence or if the noun clause includes a yes-no question, then we use, instead of WH question words, we use whether or if. This is the rule of noun clause for question with yes-no. Okay, I wonder if it will rain tomorrow. You can also write here or not. If it will rain or not. Yarın yağmur yağacak mı, yağmayacak mı merak ediyorum. So normally here is a question. Will it rain tomorrow? Yes or no? You can see that the question starts with the auxiliary will. So it is a question with starting with auxiliary. It is a yes-no question. So we use if instead of WH question word. So I wonder if it will rain tomorrow. I wonder whether or not Mary went to work yesterday. So the question normally here, the question, did Mary go to work yesterday? So I can use it in a noun clause. I wonder whether or not Mary went to work yesterday. Mary'nin dün işe gidip gitmediğini bilmiyorum. You can use or not, or you can omit it. It doesn't matter. You can also delete it. You can omit or not phrases in such sentences. So noun clauses with that. So noun clauses with that are the clause types which doesn't refer to any question. They refer to simple sentences. They refer to a fact. Actually, it is the shorter form of the fact that. So here it is the fact that, if you look at this sentence, the fact that pollution affects the quality of our lives until now is the noun clause, and it is a subject. The fact that pollution affects the quality of our lives is obvious. Hava kirliliğinin hayat kalitemizi etkilediği gerçeği, the fact that is written or not, it doesn't matter, but it still conveys the fact. Hava kirliliğinin hayat kalitemizi etkilediği gerçeği açıktır, aşikardır. Okay, so let's look at as the object. It is obvious that pollution affects the quality of our lives. Again, this time, the noun clause became the object of the main clause. Okay, so let's go on. So what is adverb clause or adverbial clause? An adverb clause is a group of words that is used to change or qualify the meaning of an adjective, a verb, a clause, or another adverb, or any other type of word or phrase, with the exception of determiners and adjectives that directly modifies nouns. So these cannot be used with adverbs. Let's see example. Adverbial clauses can be about place, about time, cause, purpose, concession, and condition. So, and they answer some questions, as you can see. So let's look at the example about place. Where there are computers, there is Microsoft software. This is an advertisement sentence as well. Bilgisayarın olduğu yerde Microsoft yazılımı vardır. Okay, you can see it's a kind of placement. So time, after the fruit is harvested, it is sold at the market. I didn't call her because I am shy is an example of cause. She took a computer course so that she could not get a better job. Okay. Although Jay has a master's degree, he works as a store clerk. If you save your money, you will be able to go to college is an example of condition. Okay, so let's move on. Adverbial clauses are always introduced by a subordinating conjunction. So subordinating conjunctions might be a time clause like after, before, when, while, or they can be as soon as, since, until. All of them you can see until here related to time clauses, they might be also called, or they might be cause and effect like because, now that, since. So you can see that all the adverbial clauses are started with one of these sentences. It might be about time or it might be about cause and effect, but without them there might not be an adverbial full clause, let's say. So there is also other conjunctions here. You can see that might be contrast, like even though, although, though, rağmen. Even though I wasn't tired, I went to bed. You can see the example here. Or it might be direct contrast, like while and whereas. Mary is rich while John is poor. You can see the example. And it might be also condition with if. It might be the variations of if also, like unless, only if, even if, whether or not, like that. So another type of the subordinate clause is the relative clause. So what is relative clause? It's a kind of dependent clause with a subject and verb, but can't stand alone as a sentence as all the other dependent clauses. It cannot stand alone, of course. It is sometimes called an adjective clause as well, because it functions like an adjective. It gives more information about a noun. They always start with relative pronouns. So let's see the examples. So here we can see the examples of relative clause sentences with different relative pronouns. These words are called relative pronouns, relative clause zamirleri. So you can see it might be subject or object. Have you seen the man who is the new marketing director? So here, the man who is the new marketing director is the object of the main clause. Have you seen him? Shortly, but instead of him, we use the man who is the new marketing director. So we can use which for things other than people. So the horse which Sue was riding is very friendly. You can see the horse which Sue was riding is the part of relative clause, and it is the subject of the main clause. It might be also object, it doesn't matter. So which sometimes refers to the whole sentence, the whole condition also. He can't type at all, o hiç klavye kullanamaz ki bu durum, which didn't surprise me, ki bu durum beni hiç şaşırtmadı. As you can see here, which doesn't refer to a noun other than people. It refers to the whole sentence. He can't type at all. The fact that he can't type at all didn't surprise me. Okay, for possession we use whose. Possession of people, animals or things, it doesn't matter. Have you seen the boy whose mother was on TV? So whose mother and boy has the possession function, let's say. So the boy's mother, boy whose mother was on TV. So you can see that the mother belongs to boy. So we can use whom instead of who when the people become the object of the pronoun, object pronoun, or in a non-defining relative clause. You will see the example also. I was invited by the counselor whom I met at the Christmas party. If you see a full sentence with subject, verb, and object after relative pronoun, then you can use who, you can use whom, you can also use that, or you can also delete them altogether. You can omit the relative pronoun here. I mean, you can say it like this. I was invited by the counselor I met at the Christmas party. So here, the relative clause become like the counselor I met at the Christmas party. Yılbaşı partisinde tanıştığım kişi tarafından davet edildim. Gördüğünüz gibi whom'u kullanmasam da olur arkadaşlar burada. Okay. So the use of that in relative clause. I liked the dress that you wore to the function last week. As you can see here, we use that for things or animals, and you can see that, for example, in this sentence, if you see a full sentence with subject, verb, and object, then it means that you can also delete this that from here. The dress you wore to the function. The dress you wore yesterday. Dün giydiğin elbise. So we don't need that also in this sentence. But here, when we look at which again, the first which refers to things or animals, the horse which Sue was riding is very friendly. You can also use that instead of this which. It doesn't matter. So relative clause are categorized into two groups as restrictive, defining, and non-restrictive or non-defining relative clauses. So defining relative clauses gives information that defines the noun, that information that is necessary for complete identification of a noun. So if you, for example, if you delete defining relative clause in a sentence, your sentence will be lack of its message. So let's try it in this example. The girl whom you saw yesterday is my sister. So if I delete this part, the girl is my sister. So which girl? Any girl. So you can see that if we don't use the relative clause, restrictive relative clause, defining relative clause here, if we don't use it, then our sentence will be lack of its message. I mean, the girl would be meaningless here without any identification or without any definition. So it might be any girl. So if we use defining relative clause, it gives information that defines the noun like an adjective. So a seaman is someone who works on a ship. For example, if you delete defining relative clause, if you delete this part, then your sentence will be very meaningless. Like a seaman is someone. Denizci bir kişidir. You can see that it is very nonsense without defining relative clause. So defining relative clause cannot be omitted from our sentence, and they define the noun like an adjective, and the information that defining relative clause give is very necessary for a complete identification of the noun. But when it comes to non-restrictive, non-defining relative clause, these relative clause and example gives additional information, extra information on something, but cannot define it. So they do not define, non-defining, that's why they are called non-defining relative clause. They are put in commas. So you can see here comma, and here is also another comma. Mary, who is my girlfriend, likes eating fast food. So you can see that the relative clause here give extra information, and if we delete or if we omit a non-restrictive relative clause, so our sentence is still a complete message, a still complete sentence. Mary likes eating fast food. So Mary, we know that there is someone like Mary likes eating fast food, and she likes eating fast food. So here, who is my girlfriend, give extra information. So this is not certainly necessary to be in this sentence. So the Ferrari, let's look at another example. Ferrari, which is in front of my house, belongs to my dad. So if you see, if we delete non-defining relative clause, it means the Ferrari belongs to my dad, and it still means there is a Ferrari and it belongs to my dad. So here, non-defining relative clause give extra information about the noun, as you can see in the example. So here is an attention part. In restrictive clauses, relative clauses, object pronouns in defining relative clause can be dropped if it is the object of the sentence. For example, the boy who met yesterday is very nice. So you cannot drop who here because it is the subject of this meet verb. But here in the second sentence, the boy who we met yesterday. So here normally there is a secret who, let's say. The boy who we met yesterday is very nice. So you see that after who or relative pronoun, object pronoun, there is an subject, verb, a full sentence. So if there is a full sentence, then you can drop it. It doesn't matter if you use it or not. In non-restrictive clauses, who, which, and who and which may not be replaced with that. It means that you will never use that in non-defining relative clauses, because after comma keep it in your mind like this. After comma, you will never use that. It gives you a good clue while solving test as well. So after comma, if you see that, delete this that. You cannot use it like that. So Atatürk, who is the founder of Turkish Republic, was born in 1881. So you can see in this non-defining relative clause that we use who to give extra information about Atatürk, because everybody knows that Atatürk was born in 1881. So here the non-restrictive clause give extra information, and we cannot use that instead of who in this sentence. So let's see syntactic ambiguity. This is the final subtitle in today's presentation. So what is syntactic ambiguity? Syntactic ambiguity occurs when a single sentence can have two or more meanings. Grammatical ambiguity is another term for it. And lexical ambiguity, on the other hand, happens when a single word in the sentence can have two or more meanings. So we have here syntactic ambiguity and lexical ambiguity. There are two types of ambiguities here, syntactic ambiguity and lexical ambiguity, because grammatical ambiguity refers to syntactic ambiguity. They are same, I mean. Okay. So how to distinguish syntactic ambiguities? So you can see here the paragraph, you can read it. So in this paragraph, it is stressed that the defining syntactic ambiguities, in order to define, let's say, syntactic ambiguities, we might sometimes apply prosodic cues like intonation and stress. For example, in this sentence, the old man and woman sat on a bench. I mean, we don't know if the women are also old like men here. So there might be two meanings for this sentence. So in order to understand if the women are also old or not, we can pay attention to prosodic rhythmic cues such as like intonation and stress. So this is one way of defining syntactic ambiguity in a sentence while listening to them. So let's look at uses. If you are not a linguist, you might be wondering where these syntactically ambiguous sentences are used. Often you will find them in newspaper headlines as well as in catchy and humorous advertising slogans. And newspaper headlines are written in a format that is described as a telegraphic style. And in instances like this, the copula is often omitted. Here, the copula is the linking verb. The copula is usually used to link subject with subject complement, I mean with the predicate. They are usually verb. In English, it is verb actually. The copular, they might be also called as copular verb. So, in newspaper headlines, usually the copula, the linking verb like emizar sometimes, are omitted. And in this case, syntactic ambiguity is also created because we cannot understand if the sentence is used, for example, as a passive voice or if it is a simple past tense. We might not understand it if the copula is omitted in a newspaper headline. So let's see these examples. I shot an elephant in my pajamas. So let's look at here. Did Groucho shot an elephant while wearing pajamas? Or did he shoot an elephant that somehow got into his pajamas? As you can see, ambiguity lends itself particularly well to comedy as well. And it makes the listener or reader stop and say, wait, what? And hopefully that momentary confusion will end in a chuckle or two. So take for this example, the chicken is ready to eat. So here, for example, the chicken is ready for us to eat, or the chicken is ready to eat its own let's say meat in a barn, for example. Was the writer saying that the chicken is hungry and is ready for feeding, or the chicken is already cooked and is therefore ready to be eaten? So you can see there is ambiguity in this sentence. So these are also good examples of ambiguity. I saw the man with binoculars. So did I have the binoculars or did he? So who has the binocular? Look at that dog with one eye. So the dog is one-eyed, or I should look it with using only one of my eye. So I watched her duck. Does she have a duck that I watched, or did she duck out of the way? So this might be a noun or verb. That's why it is an ambiguity example. The peasants are revolting. So if revolting is a noun or verb, so they are cooking apples. So a comment about the apple variety or about what people are doing to apples. So we don't know. So that's why this is an ambiguity. So let's look at here is another example. The burglar threatened the students with the knife. So who was holding the knife? The student with the knife, eli bıçaklı öğrenci mi tehdit edildi, or the burglar used the knife to threaten the students? So we don't know. You can see that there are two meanings of this sentence. So syntactic ambiguities are sentences in which it is unclear who refers to what. What is the modifier modifying? And there are actually two types of syntactic ambiguity. So the first type is when you add ing to a verb and put it in front of a noun, like milking cows. So they are milking cows. So the sentence they are milking cows could be understood to mean that those fine animals over there are a particular type of a cow, milking cows. They were milking cows. Or the sentence could mean that the farmers were in the act of extracting milk from their domesticated cows, let's say. They were milking cows. So it is an adjective, like here, milking cows, or it is a verb in a continuous tense, let's say. So the other form of syntactic ambiguity arises when with nominalization. Some words can be used as a verb or as a noun, like the touch of her hand here. The touch might be a verb or a noun. So the touch is a verb, putting the in front of it, nominalize it into a noun. It changes into a noun. Add it to another noun and you have a delightful ambiguity. If the speaker referring to the act of touching a woman's hand or a woman touching someone's hand, so here it means the touch of her hand. I mean, if I am touching her hand, or if her touching somewhere else or somebody's hands, we don't know. You can see it means two different things actually. So let's look at conclusion. So languages express an infinite number of things, unlimited number of things, with a limited number of resources. Just as limited vocabulary resources lead sometimes to lexical ambiguity. So we have syntactic ambiguity because grammatical resources are limited. So if the ambiguity is related to limited vocabulary resources, they are called lexical ambiguity. And if they are related to grammatical resources, grammatical based, so they are called syntactic ambiguity. So I hope you understood the topic clearly. So finally, ambiguities can be quite humorous, and humor has great therapeutic effects because they are used by usually comedians or stand-up presenters. So basically, syntactic ambiguity demonstrates a confusion in the meaning of a sentence, and if there is more than one possible meaning, then the sentence is syntactically ambiguous. So the comedians, for example, use these kind of sentences in order to make the audience think the other possibility, other possible meaning of a normal sentence in order to make them entertained, actually. So this was the end of today's topic. I hope you understood all the pages here, and if you have any question, you can reach me from my email. Thank you. Bye bye.